Good afternoon. I'm going to call to order the meeting of the Corporate Governance Committee of the MTA. Mr. Kurse, any public speakers? Oh, no, I have to ask Kellyanne Smith, who's just joined Lamont Kurse's team, and Kellyanne is going to moderate public speakers. Welcome, Kellyanne.
Thank you. Good day, everyone. We have 3 members of the public registered to speak today. As a reminder, we ask that all public speakers adhere to the MTA's rules and conduct and decorum. I would also like to remind our public speakers that in the interest of time and fairness to all speakers, we limit everyone to 2 minutes. Please be aware that there will be a warning beep to remind you that you have 30 seconds to conclude your remarks. The first speaker is Mr. Morey Bowden.
Good morning. I had a rather complete presentation for this morning, but what happened at the last meeting kind of made me throw that out the window. There was a discussion about commuter buses, and the fact that they up the stairs and the lifts didn't work and everything. But the real question is, why are we using buses with luggage racks underneath? Commuters don't take luggage. And what you've done with the buses, you've permitted wheelchairs and with strollers to come right on a low-floor bus, and that worked very well, and it's being expanded. So the question is, why are you buying buses with 1 means of access instead of 2? Because commuters like the fancy buses. This is about safety and saving money and getting people on and off the buses faster. You could have a low-floor bus. You could load from 2 doors. You have the facilities for fastening strollers on the floor. Well, we've always done it that way. It's time to change. I speak not for my generation, because we've screwed it up really badly. Looking around this board and every other board, young people are coming on board. Young people who think differently than I do. Than my generation. My generation has to get off the floor. This is not what I intended to speak on this morning, but what happened before needs to be looked at. We need low-floor buses for commuters, not the high ones. Use more gas, load faster and slower. And I cannot leave without thanking all of the people at the MTA who've taken the time, 1, to help me, and 2, to teach me. I'm not that smart. A lot of people took time to help me.
Our next speaker is Jason Anthony.
Hey, Jano. Here I'm entering my 3rd week back in school. I want to comment in the proposal in the rules on the code of ethics. It's a great idea to give an overhaul because rules of code of ethics are good when we are entering a job, but especially in the MTA being a governmental agency where we're seeing people commenting, let's say, bad things, where people are constantly being in the public spotlight and being in the news constantly. And let's say, especially to people that I know that are being investigated for being involved, that should be investigated for alleged incident in a subway station. It should be reviewed as an ethical incident. So let's include that and other ethical matters into the code of ethics, shall we, Jano? And I'll see you guys later in Capital Program.
Our last speaker is Charlton D'Souza.
Afternoon, everyone. My name is Walter D'Souza, president of Passengers United. Mr. Chairman, all the advocacy groups in the Passengers United, we need a separate time.
Hey, Charlton, we can't, your connection is corrupted. We cannot hear what you're saying.
Oh, we can hear.
Charlton, we have an issue with your connection. For today, this concludes our public speakers. Lamont?
Okay, thank you to the public speakers, as always. The minutes of the November 29th, 2022 meeting of this committee are in the books. Any questions regarding the minutes? Noting the absence of Mr. Albert, may I have a motion to approve the Corporate Governance Committee minutes?
Second.
Second, Ms. Lopez. All in favor? Any opposition? The minutes are approved. Lamont, Mr. Kurtz, would you take us through the agenda, please?
Surely. The first item on the agenda is the review and approval of the MTA All-Agency General Contract Procurement Guidelines and the All-Agency Service Contract Procurement Guidelines. Public Authorities Law Section 2879 requires the board to annually approve the MTA procurement guidelines. There are no proposed changes to the service contract procurement guidelines. However, Evan Iceland from MTA C&D is here to explain the proposed revisions to the General Contract Procurement Guidelines. Evan, would you please?
Thanks, Lamont. There are 3 proposed changes to the guidelines. The first simply adds back a few words that were inadvertently deleted in the last revision. The second proposed change modifies the guidelines to exclude small business mentoring contracts from the requirement to notify the Finance Committee chair of contract mods that increase the total price or duration by more than 10%. That notice was intended to alert the finance chair of significant contract changes that would not otherwise be brought to the attention of the board. But the small business mentoring contracts are typically lower dollar and shorter duration contracts intended to introduce small businesses to working with the MTA. And because of the lower dollar amount and short duration of these contracts, relatively minor changes have the unintended consequence of triggering the notice requirement, generating additional paperwork, and causing delay in the processing of changes and payments to these small businesses. The last proposed change will add the term "where practicable" to the requirement to use a contracting approach like A+B bidding that considers factors other than just price in selecting a contractor when the design-build approach is not used. While we use A+B bidding often, it's simply not always practical, and this change will allow for reasonable discretion in those cases.
Okay, thank you, Evan. Any questions? Ms. Lopez?
I just want to make sure that even though we may exclude that, it doesn't mean that we wouldn't have updates on the progress of this program, correct?
That's a good point. We do regularly update on it. You may recall last year, I think they did 70, almost exactly the number that they projected and set as the goal. I think it was 73 contracts, right, Evan? And they got 71 or 72.
Yeah.
This is something that, in addition, it will be brought to the board because there's been a sort of an oversight change. It's been all consolidated. It used to be kind of split between civil rights and MTA C&D. Now the guys and women who oversee contracts and run contracts are fully in charge of this program. So we will be bringing it on regular cycle, right, Evan, to the board.
Yeah, this isn't going to reduce the board reporting at all. There's a separate notification requirement for contracts that appear to be exceeding the 10% margin. And the small business mentoring contracts are very small and short contracts. typically, because of things that we've done, we can't get them access quickly enough. We're frequently reporting on them for no real reason. That's not really meaningful. And so we're just taking that out of the reporting requirement. But in terms of reporting the progress of small business and how much we're awarding, the dollar values, all that remains the same.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? I will ask for a motion in favor of the service and procurement guidelines. Ms. Lopez, second, Mr. Chu. All in favor? Any opposition or abstention? Okay, the guidelines are approved. Lamont.
The next item on the agenda is the review and approval of the MTA All-Agency and Board Member Code of Ethics. Public Authorities Law, Section 2824, requires the board to adopt the Code of Ethics. The proposed revisions to the MTA All-Agency Code of Ethics and the MTA Board Member Code of Ethics are to ensure compliance with the Ethics Commission Reform Act of 2022, to reflect changes resulting from MTA transformation, and to strengthen the MTA codes of ethics. Both the MTA Code of Ethics as well as the MTA Board Member Code of Ethics, contain mostly non-substantive changes, including changing the name of the Joint Commission on Public Ethics to the Commission on Ethics and Lobbying in Government. Among the substantive changes to the All-Agency Code of Ethics are: 1, streamlining and consolidating MTA ethics program by centralizing agency ethics officer functions under MTA corporate compliance at headquarters. 2, providing a definition of what constitutes an outside activity requiring approval from the MTA and the newly formed Commission on Ethics and Lobbying in Government. And 3, strengthening and monitoring the detecting of conflicts of interest by requiring ongoing conflicts of interest disclosure and certification.
Thanks, Lamont. Any questions? This is one of the continuing results of transformation, that in effect the ethics function at the MTA, which used to reside separately in each of the operating agencies, was consolidated into the organization that Mr. Kurz heads in MTA headquarters. So all the questions and rulings affecting that are now going to his office. I think it's self-evident, but it needed to be changed in the words. Any other questions or comments? Ms. Lopez.
Just wondering why for both documents there was such a large gap of revisions from, I think one was from like 14 to 23 and the other one from 15 to 23.
Well, first I would say that, we do bring the Code of Ethics to the board every year. And I would also say, and this may sound a little bit bragging, but I think that code, which is in many instances stronger than required by state law, has held up to the test of time. Many of the provisions that we put in there initially were far ahead of things that would come later in legislation. So it's actually been a very good document. We built in enough flexibility for it to grow without having to revise it, but with enough clarity that our employees would understand what they were required to do. So I think, for my view, it's been a very good document. It's held a test of time. Tried and true.
Anything else? Okay. May I have a motion? Mr. Jones, Mr. Chu, will you second? All in favor? Any opposition or abstention? The guidelines are approved. Mr. Kurz.
The next item on the agenda is the review and approval of the 22 Mission Statement and Performance Management Report pursuant to Public Authorities Law, Section 1269F and 2824A. John Kaufman is here to discuss the 2022 report.
Public Authorities Law, Section 1269F and Section 2824A require MTA to annually re-examine its mission statement, reassess its stakeholders and selected performance measurement indicators, and to submit a report based on the performance indicator results from the previous year. The MTA and its board engage in oversight of agency operating performance throughout the year. The board, through its transit, rail, and bridge tunnel operating committees, closely monitors agency operating performance. Each operating agency reports its most recent performance data in posted monthly reports and in committee books distributed in advance of public MTA operating committee meetings, which are conducted at least 11 times a year. At these public meetings, operating agency results are reviewed and discussed by board members and agency senior staff. In addition, presentations focused on particular areas of performance are made by the agency staff to the board operating committees periodically through the year in accordance with the work plan schedule of each operating committee. The MTA website also contains a performance dashboard for each of the MTA operating agencies, updated monthly, summarizing the agency's leading performance measurements. as the MTA has increased its commitment to transparency and consistently meeting open data requirements in a timely manner, you can already find most of this information in the report on the MTA website.
Okay, any questions? And I take it the documents that were being asked the board for action on were provided in the materials for folks to review? Okay, because we just want to make sure it's all open. All right, questions or comments? It's an area where I think we're data and open data where the agency has made tremendous strides is actually pretty strong in this respect now. Motion to approve the 2022 Mission Statement and Performance Management Report. Mr. Zuckerman, thank you. Second, thank you. Any opposed? The report is approved. Rules of conduct.
Next,
You did appear to be motioning with
next on the agenda is the review and approval of the revisions to the rules of conduct. Paige Graves, MTA General Counsel, will discuss the revisions.
Thank you. In June 2022, at the request of the Governor of New York, there was a change to the New York State penal law concerning the right to carry or possess a firearm in certain areas of New York City. To ensure the safety of the public and compliance with the new penal law provisions, Transit, MAPSTOA, MTA Bus, Sertoa, Long Island Railroad, and Metro North each submitted a notice of emergency adoption and proposed rulemaking in accordance with the requirements of the New York State Administrative Procedures Act, SAPA. Those notices sought the immediate temporary adoption of the firearm rules and the requisite publication of the firearm rules in the New York State Register. The revised firearm rules prohibit the carrying of firearms or other weapons, as the term is used and defined in the New York State Penal Code, in or on any facility, conveyance, terminal, station, or train except as permitted by law. No public comments or objections to the firearm rules have been received since they were published in December 2022, in accordance with the SAPA requirements.
Thank you, Paige, and thank you for your work to make sure that we continued the prohibition on firearms in our system after the court decisions, which created complexity in this area. I know how much work you've done, so thank you. Any questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion to? Oh,
I'm sorry,
I'm
Mr. Chair, I have a question. Will these be posted in public areas or anything, or?
They will be part of our rules of conduct, which are posted. Typically, you see them on the digital screens and throughout our system.
Anybody else? Okay. Motion to approve the revision to the firearm rules and the permanent adoption. Mr. Jones?
Second.
Second by Ms. Mahaltzis. All in favor? Any opposition or abstention? The report is approved. Whistleblower policy, Mr. Kearse.
Next on the agenda is the review of the MTA whistleblower policy. At this time, the staff is not recommending any changes to our policy. Finally, on the agenda, our policies requiring board approval. Public Authorities Law, Section 2824 requires the board to adopt certain policies. There are no policies requiring board approval at this time.
Okay, that's the full agenda for this meeting. Are there any further comments or questions? Okay, with that, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you. Second, thank you. The meeting stands adjourned.